Hi there, Steve Kaufman here again to talk about language learning, and I'm going to focus today on compelling input, CI, which I consider to be a revolution in language learning. A revolution not because it's totally new in the sense that I think that's always how people have learned languages, but it's a revolution in the sense that language instruction, language teachers are increasingly recognizing that we learn the language through input, hopefully compelling input, and that a lot of the specific sort of language instruction, testing, grammar explanation is significantly less important. That the time we spend on that activity is usually better spent with compelling input. Now, in that regard, tomorrow I'm going to Portland, Oregon, or near Portland, Oregon, where Stephen Krashen and Krashen Mason are running a clinic on story listening. They have these clinics in various places in the United States, perhaps elsewhere, and they work with teachers and explain and talk about different techniques for using story listening as the sort of core instructional technique as opposed to explanations, drills, and testing. I don't know much more about it than that. I will know much more after tomorrow. But it's people like particularly Stephen Krashen and Krashen Mason who are the revolutionaries who have introduced this simple concept of compelling input. And I know that in my own case, I have used compelling input to learn languages. If you look behind me, you see books and, CDs and stuff, and I have immersed myself in all kinds of compelling input in order to learn languages and have spent relatively little time on grammar explanations. It doesn't mean I have spent no time on grammar explanations. I do review them, the grammar rules, with no intention of remembering what I see. I review, declension tables with no intention of remembering what I see there. But I do find that it helps to make me a little more alert, helps me to get more out of my input activities. And apparently there's a story that Abe Lincoln said, if I were going to cut down a tree, I would spend 80% of my time sharpening the axe. So some of these activities can help make you more alert, more observant. I notice in my Arabic, for example, after each lesson, I go through the words and phrases. In fact, I deliberately save certain phrases, and then I review them using a dictation. So I'm forced to write out in Arabic what I hear. This does slow me down in terms of acquiring new words, but on the other hand, it helps me read better because with Arabic, a major problem is the writing system. I'm still confusing letters, Arabic letters, and so forth and so on. So, compelling input. One other thing with regard to input, I just did a 27-minute interview with Oli Richards, who is a great polyglot and has a following, and I'm going to put links to his blog and his website here. And Oli has produced graded readers in a variety of languages, and Oli, who is fluent in a lot of languages, including 3 Romance languages, has decided to spend 2 to 3 months focusing on Italian, very much input-based, and he's going to keep a record of his activities and progress. He's going to do this with a link, and we talk about this in a video, and the video will be put up on this channel on Thursday. So, while I mention Oli and I mention graded readers, I want to touch a bit on the subject of compelling input. Now, tomorrow, or the following day, when I meet with Stephen Krashen and Krashen Mason and others, we will talk about compelling input. One issue with compelling input is when you start in a language, and people often ask me, how do you start listening? How do you start reading? You don't know anything. Obviously, you have to start with simple material. You have to start with simple material where you have both audio and text. I do this, of course, using link, because then I can look words up and I can review them and then listen. And if I create playlists of my lessons, then the playlists track how many hours I'm listening, and so there are a lot of statistics there that remind me that I am progressing in the language, even though at times I feel frustrated that I think I'm not making any great progress. So I think there are 3 stages of input. The first stage is these simple materials like our mini stories, which are not that simple, but I think they're accessible for most people at a very early stage, if not the absolute beginner stage. I'm using them as a beginner in Arabic. That this is material that is not authentic. It's not tremendously compelling. It talks about everyday situations in life, uses, high frequency verbs, and there's a lot of repetition. But because we are struggling to get a toehold on the language, and we're struggling to notice and remember words and phrases, to that extent it's compelling, I find, because I am motivated to learn the language. But very soon you want to move into something where the actual content is of itself interesting. So Oli, for example, has these graded readers. People may invent stories, children's stories. The difficulty there is that people's interests vary. Like I would be interested in a graded reader, for example, in Arabic, on Arabic history. I'm not so interested in a graded reader taken from 1001 Nights, for example. I'm less interested in that. I would be interested in sort of relatively easy conversation, natural conversation, which is then transcribed, because natural conversation tends to use more high frequency words. So all of those things would be the kind of graded material that I'm interested in. Other people might be interested in children's stories, folk tales, or whatever. So we have the sort of beginner material with a lot of repetition. We have graded material, which it's a little more difficult to find something that suits a wide variety of tastes. And then we have the sort of genuine, authentic material. And there we can find it on the internet and audio. For example, Il Narratore, who produces wonderful Italian ebooks, ilnarratore.com, and he puts out audio ebooks. So you can take the ebook, import it into Link, listen to the audio. So to me, I see compelling input as consisting of the beginner material, a lot of repetition, intermediate material, which is lower sort of or higher percentage of high frequency vocabulary, and then the genuinely authentic, compelling input. So I'm very interested in finding out with these teachers in Portland and Stephen Krashen and Krashen and Mason how they deal with these sort of stages of compelling input, because compelling has also to be comprehensible. One final point here, I'm interested in meeting with teachers. And we at Link, we want to get more involved with groups, like a classroom group or other groups. How do you adapt Link to a classroom situation or to some other group learning situation? What are the tasks that you assign your learners that they bring to the classroom or to the group discussion? And what do they do then in the classroom, and how does that relate to their Link learning activity? And we have one person in Spain, Antonio, who is working with us to try to make more schools, universities, and other groups in Spain aware of Link and how it can be tremendously beneficial to their language learning. Part of it is to explain the power of compelling input. I mean, Link is a facilitator, a system that makes compelling input more accessible, more quickly, and helps you retain vocabulary. So Antonio has asked me to do a video introducing Link, and I did this in Spanish. And so after this video, you'll be able to listen to my video in Spanish. I apologize, there are no subtitles. We also have a collaborator, Konstantin, who is in Kiev and who is an online tutor to Russian speakers, wherever they might be located. He went to Bratislava to the Polyglot Conference and spoke about how he uses Link in his online tutoring activity. But he is also looking at ways in Ukraine, where he lives, and perhaps elsewhere in the Russian-speaking world, to look at how Link can be used as part of a group or classroom-based learning experience. So those are kinds of the directions that we are heading into. And so, if you understand Spanish, you can listen to my Spanish video. And Thursday, you'll hear my discussion with Oli, and we will have an opportunity to follow Oli's progress. All right, then. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.